Right, okay, welcome everyone to this Facebook Live. It's Dr. Raja's Carer Clinic again, and today we're discussing Reminiscence. My name's Sue Hines and I'm one of the practitioners at Dementia Carers Count, and I'll be supporting Raja through this Facebook Live. So Dr. Raja is our practicing elderly and dementia care specialist who supports us at Dementia Carers Count. And I'm just going to hand straight over to Dr. Raja to give, for you, Dr. Raja, to give viewers an insight into what we're going to be looking at today.
So thanks, Sue, and good afternoon, everyone. So the idea is to have a discussion about reminiscence therapy and how it can be useful for people with dementia, the carers of people with dementia, to try and navigate through what it could do to someone with dementia, what benefits that they will achieve, discuss a bit about how to frame these sessions around reminiscing, and then to try and also understand about how we need to be a bit cautious about certain things being discussed. But before we go into that, I thought we'll do our usual stuff of starting with a case vignette of someone that I have seen more recently, I would say. And it was fascinating because sadly this gentleman has a recent diagnosis of a dementia, but he used to be a painter of great reputation, and it took us by surprise when he mentioned about some of the good work he had done. And then just sitting with him during the consultation and the reviews to have a conversation with him about the famous painters that he had met, the places that he had traveled to, the kind of artwork he had done, where it's exhibited. It was just refreshing, and it made him, more importantly, valued. Made him feel very happy that there was someone who was willing to listen to some of the great moments of his life. And in a way, it also made him feel more calm in himself, more understanding of his current situation. And that is why I think it's such a useful thing for people with dementia, jointly with their carers, to be involved with. And it is important that we continue to treasure those important personal biographical memories of people and make them enjoy some of those very important moments of happiness that they've had in their life.
Thank you. That's a lovely case vignette you've given us there, Dr. Raja. And there's a lot in there, isn't there? Because there's the relationships perhaps with a clinician in a nervous environment where he's anxious. It gives you the ability to see the real scope of his skills when he's tapping into some of those longer term memories, and the difference between that with what you're seeing in the here and now in clinic. And also that value and dignity in that respect as well. I think it comes across. And you're always going to do better if you're calm about something, aren't you? You're always going to be able to use your skills and shine as much as possible. And one thing that all carers want to do when supporting someone with dementia is to help them to shine and use their abilities to the best that they can. So I think that's a lovely story to give.
Yeah, and that's what evidence says as well, and that's how reminiscence therapy becomes very useful. Is that it gives people a sense of purpose because they are doing something, whereas most people with dementia would be more used to people doing something for them. Just the concept that they could talk about the life story, take charge of the conversation, becomes more useful to them, because then they're gaining a bit more self-esteem, confidence in the kind of topics that they can talk about, that they're very familiar with, and in a way that makes their mood feel better. And we know that people with dementia have a high degree of comorbid depression, anxiety, and just to have that degree of self-esteem, confidence, and happiness brought back into their life, alongside the fact that it is very purposive conversation and they're in charge of it, that makes it very, very useful to them. And also it reestablishes what we've always talked about, in that family carers should treasure the relationship role, not just the carer role, because that's what they are mainly there as, sons, daughters, husbands, wives. That's what they are there for. And just having this conversation about life events just brings them that bit closer in that way.
And I think you started when you first gave the introduction of saying that we're going to cover the benefits for the person with dementia and the carer. And absolutely, you've just said it there, that reminiscence and discussing, or any sort of reminiscence activity, and we'll go into a few in this session, doesn't just benefit the person with dementia, it benefits that relationship that was always there before, and can re-establish that, as opposed to sort of the dynamic of a carer and a person with dementia. So really, really useful. So as you say, we're going to look at the benefits, we're going to look at framing sessions, cautionary advice really about using reminiscence. If anybody has any questions or comments, please do put them in the chat box. It's not always easy to spot them, but we will get back to you if we don't manage to come to your comment during the session. And if you do want to private message us as well, some people I know don't want to put it in the chat, then do so as well, and we'll try to get to those. We'll also be putting links to various different things throughout this session, things that you can get involved with Dementia Carers Count and other offers that we have sort of coming up. So just to start, we've used the word reminiscence quite a few times already, and I think lots of viewers will be familiar with what reminiscence itself means. But specifically, if we look at what's reminiscence therapy, could you give us a little bit of a better understanding about what reminiscence therapy might be in its various guises?
Yes, certainly. So, so reminiscence therapy, in a simple way of understanding, means that it's about discussing events and experiences from past life events. So we are essentially talking about the person and the life that they've had, and having a conversation. More importantly, it's not an interrogation to find out, oh, do you remember this? How was it? It's more about trying to engage them in a discussion about events and life experiences that they've had. And the whole idea is that we are working on the long-term memory of the individual with dementia, because long-term memory is one of the last things to lose when dementia progresses. And it's always good to start from a point of strength of the individual with dementia, and long-term memory is the strongest memory that they have. So it's useful to talk about life events, life experiences, which they are very accustomed to talking about, sharing, and do hold those very important aspects of memory. And the whole idea is that it will then stimulate mental activity, it will make them feel more confident, it will increase their sense of well-being, the sense of purpose, and it will also help if there are any behavioral disturbances. Then talking about something that people are confident about talking and enjoy talking about just reduces the chances of any degree of disturbed behavior as such. So to summarize, it's about talking about life events, it's talking about life experiences, but it's a discussion, not an interrogation as such.
Really important. It's trying to avoid those test questions, isn't it, that you know the answer to, and as you say, creating an interrogation for somebody. So is there any evidence for reminiscence therapy?
There is a strong evidence for reminiscence therapy, and a lot of it is dependent on the context in which it's being held. Obviously, involving people who are very familiar with the individual, like family members, makes it even more beneficial. And the strongest evidence it has is in terms of reducing the chances of depression happening. It reduces the chances of anxiety going up. It also increases the confidence that people have in themselves. It improves self-esteem. So all of those kind of positive measures of well-being and general mental health are the kind of things that tend to improve. And the way that it's got impact on dementia itself is that we do know that the sense of familiarity with people, environment, makes the progressive dementia that much slower, and therefore it's important that people are able to reminisce and hold on to some of the positive brain connections that they still have, and they can benefit from. So that's the research evidence for people with dementia. Again, it's not just about people with dementia, it's also about family carers. because it just gives them that open space to talk about positive things in life, the positive connections, the fond memories that they have about their loved one. And that brings them back to the relationship role rather than the role of being a care provider or the kind of constant worry that they might otherwise face about here and now. Because reminiscence therapy is not about short-term memory, it's not intricative, it's a conversation, and therefore it just makes the primary emphasis about the relationship itself and the kind of life that's been lived together for years and years. And therefore it's very beneficial to the carer as much as to the person with dementia.
Many reasons and many aspects of evidence to suggest that it's really good, from reducing depression, reducing the risk of anxiety, improving self-esteem, improving confidence. And certainly as a speech and language therapist, I note if I'm talking to somebody with dementia in the here and now about topics today, often somebody with dementia has word finding difficulties, struggles to put sentences together. And a lot of that can be alleviated when they're talking about something from the past. And we all know what it's like when we get a word finding difficulty, isn't it? It's so frustrating. So if you're always talking in the here and now, your self-esteem is going to reduce. You're going to feel more anxious, more frustrated, and potentially give up on trying to engage in conversations because you think, well, I can't find my words. But, you know, another aspect that if you're using reminiscence therapy, just almost giving that freedom to someone again to be able to talk more fluently a lot of the time. So what would be needed? Because reminiscence therapy sounds like you need to be some skilled practitioner to carry out reminiscence therapy, but what would actually be needed to carry it out?
I think the important aspect of, or the essential ingredient of reminiscence therapy is to have a conversation, and it has to remain a conversation all the way through. So the easiest way would be to start a conversation about a topic that the person with dementia would be very familiar. It might be, say, for example, going back to the person that I started this session with, the person who is interested in painting. The easiest way would be to talk about painting, painters, and then it becomes a free-flowing conversation. And it's important that as a therapist or as a family member who is involved in the conversation, or a carer in a care home or in a hospital, the idea is that you're just trying to give the person the ability to own the conversation. So they talk more and we listen. And it's more about trying to give them some directions to what they could talk about, rather than setting any particular agenda and saying, well, we are going to talk about painting today. This person should name all great impressionists that we've ever had. So that's not the whole point. But if it was that the person had a very particular attachment to a painting, then they could talk about it for 20 minutes. And that's actually very good, rather than trying to list 20 people who are impressionists as such. So the ingredient is that it's a conversation. It has to begin as a conversation. It has to proceed as a conversation. And then it should come to an end when the other person has run out of things to talk about. So we're not actually trying to dig deep and deep in a way to embarrass the person not being able to recall things. And I say it's conversation, and I've come across this, and this was something that I noticed when my grandfather had dementia, and we know that people with dementia forget familiar faces. They sometimes misidentify people, and relationships don't come to them readily. And my mom, when she found that my grandfather was getting to that point, and whenever she went to see him, she would always start the conversation by saying, "How are you, father?" And in a way, with that one sentence, she tries to establish that, well, you're my father, I'm your daughter. I'm not going to test you by saying, do you know me? Can you identify me? I'm not going to put you in that embarrassing situation or a frustrating situation. So that's the whole point. So we start by a conversation, by talking about painting, and then it kind of will evolve into something that the person understands. So again, to summarize, it is starting with a topic that the person is very familiar with, and it is a conversation to be had with the person who is suffering from dementia owning the conversation, and it's to be more guided by them.
I think what you've just said is reflected quite well in a comment by Geraldine, who says she wished she'd known some of these techniques when she was supporting her mum with dementia. They spent a lot of time trying to correct her, and when she struggled to remember certain events, and she can now see how it caused her stress to do that. And I think one of the things I often say is just be careful of those what we call WH questions, to avoiding when did you go here, what did you do when you were there, why did you do, or how did that happen? As you say, it's conversation, it's not an interrogation. And another thing often that our practitioners say in the live online sessions is just give someone space to recall those memories before thinking you need to jump in with a question. So you might just sort of say, oh, I like that painting on the wall there. You've just made a comment, and give them 10 seconds or so to start to activate their own memories and come back with something. We're very quick, aren't we, to jump in with is that a picture you would have liked? What would you have done? But just giving that space with a starting opening, almost launch pad, giving someone a launch pad to go in. Okay, I know we're halfway through this session already, and we could talk forever on the various techniques. So one of the things that we know can be useful for reminiscence as well, and I think viewers who joined early might have just heard me mentioning them, is memory boxes and life stories.
Yeah.
Because the carer might know the person very well, but a paid carer may not. So they can be really useful, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very important that we do encourage people to have a memory box, especially if they're going into a different environment, be it a hospital, be it a care home, because then just opening the box, picking an object will just be very helpful in terms of guiding the conversation, focusing on the kind of important long-term memory treasure that people with dementia have, and could be very useful in deflecting from the current concerns that they might have. And it makes them more prone towards having a conversation rather than just otherwise the conversation could be very stilted, and it might turn into yes or no type of questions, and it becomes more challenging. So having a memory box and linking it with what we recommend in various forms as life story work, this is me type of document, all of those would be very helpful, because we are essentially drawing on the greatest strength that people with dementia have, which is their long-term memory. And sometimes it can also be useful, say for example, if someone had worked in healthcare, they had worked as a nurse, then a lot of good memories might be triggered when they see a nursing equipment of some kind. So even someone going in to do a blood pressure recording, it just makes the conversation much easier if they start talking about, well, these are kind of automated machines at this point in time. Must have been very different when you were recording these. Then it becomes easy for them to talk about how things were very different in their time and what they did, and there might be a story to tell about a difficult person that they saw. So it's being aware that memory box is helpful and it should have things, but equally there will be objects that people will come across in their daily routine, and each of those might actually be providing a significant story in itself for the person with dementia. And it's also I've also found it useful to have dolls in the wards that I worked with, because people, especially women with dementia, they still have that very strong maternal instinct, and they do want to talk about some of the great moments that they've had in their role as mother. And sometimes having a doll just brings out those memories that they want to share about their children when they were born, when they were growing up. And they are very, very beautiful memories to be recalled several times. So I think memory boxes and linking it to objects that we come across in our daily life, and then linking it to life stories, this is me document, would be very helpful, especially when one is in an unfamiliar environment.
And as you say, everybody has lots of beautiful stories to tell, don't they?
Yeah.
I think just for viewers, we do a whole live online session on memory, and we look at the use of long-term memories and how important it is for people to connect with those. So do look at our website because that session is often available. The one cautionary tale I would tell at this point, Dr. Raja, is sometimes when people are tapping into their longer term memory and they're enjoying that moment of reminiscing, they may do things which we call confabulate. So viewers may sort of think, oh no, they make up stories. It didn't happen like that. But it's often actually their brain trying really hard to put together a puzzle, isn't it? Some of the pieces of the puzzle just go out of sync. So I would say if somebody is what we call confabulating and not getting quite the facts correct, if it's causing them an enjoyment and they're still accessing some memories, that's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be challenged all the time, as long as it's not causing any distress to the person who is suffering from dementia or the carer who's listening to it. Then it's fine. There's still a conversation to be had. There may be an element of or a nugget of truth in all the bits that are being said. And who doesn't want to indulge in fascinating fantasies about oneself? So it's not to be entirely dismissed. And it's not always the case that they need to be challenged to the point where it causes distress.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to Geraldine's comment, doesn't it? So are there any particular, if it's not using a memory box, so are there any particular themes that lend themselves well to reminiscence therapy?
Yes, so holiday is a good thing, and people would have gone on holidays, and therefore just talking about holiday would be a very good theme. All of us would have been involved in games, board games in particular. I'm sure many of us, Christmas wouldn't pass without playing Monopoly or whatever it is. Monopoly, it's in my house, and I consistently lose, and I'm sure that will be a story to tell when I get old myself. So board games, games that people are interested in. Talking about the pets that they may have had when growing up, that again is a very useful and unchallenging topic to be had. Talking about the hobbies that people were involved in, and we did talk about this gentleman that I saw who was very interested in jazz last time, and we had one of those sessions, and it was that helped to calm him down. So knowing about hobbies and how and what kind of interests that the person with dementia had would be very helpful. Looking at photo albums that people would have had I say in those days in a kind of loose term. I'm sure there's a virtual photo album that all of us have these days on our phone, but the actual physical photo album would be a very useful place to start. So those are very useful things that one could talk about without getting into problems, and food especially. Some, there will be things that people like, and there'll be things that people won't like, and talking about food would be a very interesting conversation to be had as well. And as the saying goes, there's always a story about Brussels sprout from anyone that you have a conversation with. So it is a fascinating topic in itself, and people will find it very interesting.
Okay. And as you say, pets are often one, and also the physical sort of photo albums are useful. My one sort of plea to carers is always you have duplicates. So try not to use your original photos, have lots of duplicate albums, so that if one is to go into hospital or into another care environment with someone, if it goes missing, it's not your originals and you're stuck. And so that's a really sort of key thing to do. The other things often are music, aren't they, in sport? I know we've joined up with Middlesex Cricket County Cricket Club, haven't we, to provide an opportunity for people to have reminiscence around cricket, for example, if that was something that was big in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. The people with dementia currently would be the kind of generation who would have grown up listening to Test Match Special on radio, and it is something that would always be there on the background whilst they did other things. And it's very important for people with dementia to be able to relive some of those moments to be able to talk about those very fond memories that they have about cricket. And that's why we've partnered with Middlesex County Cricket Club to try and provide that opportunity for people with dementia and their family carer. So it's not an exercise that's just done in isolation. It's also easy for carers knowing that they could go and have a day, not worry about the person with dementia, because they will have the person with dementia there to try and talk to them about some of those very important and fond memories that they have. And it will be a less stressful, relaxing day where people can talk about something that they're quite familiar with. So Middlesex County Cricket Club has kindly agreed to start as a pilot for the 19th of July, where people with dementia and their carers contacting our charity will then be allocated tickets to go and watch a day of test match where Middlesex play Surrey, and it would be hopefully a bright sunny day where people can dip in and out, can stay for as long as they want, but enjoy reminiscing and having those very important conversations.
Or reminiscing about rain stopping play as well.
Or reminiscing about rain stopping play, and then all those other kind of things that we could do when the rain stops play. Yes.
Yeah, because it's an all part of what happens, isn't it? So it's a pilot, and it's something we'd like to roll out into other areas as well. So there'll be a link in here to see how you can get involved for that. We did mention pets, and we've mentioned lots of different things on Reminiscence. Sometimes there might be things that are topics that might want to be avoided. And I wondered if you had any advice on that.
It is a very important question. So it essentially did come up when we were trying to with NHS England to try and write something that would be useful for carers in terms of conversations. And one thing, conversations especially for people from ethnic minority background, they might have undergone some kind of discrimination in the past, and that is something that they may not essentially want to talk about or dwell about, and therefore we need to be very careful in terms of questions that might make them consciously think about some of those very difficult moments in their life, be it migrating from one place to another place, or kind of challenges that they had in the process, or perhaps the discrimination that they met. And we need to be very careful, especially as we do talk a lot about the Windrush generation, and therefore we need to be careful about what we are involving in terms of the theme of reminiscence as such. The other important thing is that people might have had very traumatic childhood, might have been unfortunately in abusive relationships, and we need to try and make sure that we are very careful not to make them re-experience some of those very troubled moments of their life. So so being aware of the trauma, whether it was trauma that was caused in the context of growing up, or the environment, or the different things that led for people to move from one place to another place. So all of those things will have to be avoided where possible, to try and make sure that we don't make people re-experience those negative thoughts. And especially if they were to be in a hospital environment or in a care environment where they're not familiar with the surrounding, then the brain will just jump immediately to a very paranoid, very anxious state, and then it becomes very difficult to bring back the person to a sense of even mental state.
Yeah, a lot of triggers that can a new environment can trigger those feelings and those emotions. And it's one of the reasons it's so important to have a life story book, so
Yes.
that other people in those situations really do understand what those triggers are. And I know for many carers, for themselves, it will be tough creating those life books for themselves as well. It's not necessarily easy for the carer to help the person with dementia to create the books, because those reminiscences might also be there for them as well. So if you do want our support at all, do get in touch with us if you want to talk through it, and sort of how to put the life book, or you want some additional support to put together some of this information as well, because it's not just difficult for the person with dementia, but also for many carers as well. So we're coming to the end, Dr. Raja. I thank you so much for today's session. Again, like always, we could have talked for a very long time. Please, if you're viewing, don't forget to register for tickets for the cricket if that's something you're interested in, whether there's play or there's rain. I'd just also like to mention quickly that our 2023 Family Carers Survey is now live, and we'd really value your thoughts and opinions. It really helps us to shape the support that we will provide over the coming year and further forward from there. So, and what you'd like us to campaign for as well. So it takes about 15 minutes to complete. You can tell us as much or as little as you want to, and there'll be a link in the comments box in a moment. I'm back with you this evening for another Facebook Live, and that's with Grace Meadows. It's the third of our Music Mondays sessions, and I'm sure we'll be touching on reminiscence and the use of music for reminiscence in that one. But for me, thank you so much, everyone. I'm just going to hand back to Raja for any final thought, and then we'll be off.
Well, I'm looking forward to the 19th of July. I'm hoping to see as many people there as you turn up, and I'm sure it will be a very important memory that I will hold in my head and cherish in my old age. So so let's all build those beautiful memories, and then let's help elderly people with those beautiful memories to talk about them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.